Ladies and gentlemen, I have breaking news from Denmark. Tomorrow, October 6th, there was supposed to be a debate in Parliament, and the Prime Minister faced a vote of no confidence. So instead of suffering that public humiliation, she went to the Queen of Denmark and scheduled a new early snap election for November 1st. The government of Denmark has fallen. Now, this was brought about by the COVID-19 extermination of all Danish farm-raised minks. This is an absolutely insane story. So in a recent video, I said that the European Union's anti-Hungarian resolution starts out by saying Hungary assumed brand new powers under the pretense of fighting COVID-19. As if every single other country in the EU did not do the exact same thing. Now, multiple countries liquidated some amount of farm-raised minks under the pretense of fighting COVID-19. I know that the Netherlands and Canada also did. But in Denmark, they mass exterminated every single farm-raised mink. They killed them with poisonous gas and buried them with construction equipment in shallow graves. Many of them were popping out of the earth for the next year. According to the European media, this was the first time that any European country had a compulsory elimination of an entire farm sector. So the claim was in Denmark that minks could catch COVID-19 and then they could become a reservoir for the cold virus and undermine future vaccines. And so the entire population was liquidated, and this has been called the first time that an entire farm sector was wiped out like that, because normally it's only select herds and select farms. It's not the entire sector. Now, there was not actually any legal basis for the government of Denmark to do this. And the Danish parliament appointed a commission that reported last June, and they said that government officials made grossly misleading statements in order to get the public to go along with this. Denmark was under the control of Red Bloc, which is a coalition of a bunch of left-wing parties. The Prime Minister is from the Social Democrats, and I made videos talking about her in the past, and every single time people post comments and complain that I pronounced her name wrong. Well, all of the Scandinavian languages have different nuances that are super hard to comprehend. So get ready, because I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. So she became the prime minister in the last election. She was the height of girl power. I think she may have been Denmark's youngest prime minister ever, elected at 41, super celebrated by the national media. Now, she rose to power by pivoting to a more secure borders, anti-immigration stance. So I've made a bunch of videos about Denmark in the early days of this channel. Essentially, in Northern Europe, if we take, Germany, the Low Countries, the Scandinavian countries, United Kingdom, Denmark is way more to the right on immigration than the rest of them. Of course, that is not saying very much. But the reason that they moved to the right on immigration is because of the Danish People's Party, which essentially was an anti-immigration populist party, and they would get large chunks of the vote, and they would become kingmaker, who would then vote to put which minority coalition got to be in power. And in exchange, they would get concessions on immigration. And Danish immigration law continuously got better and better, far better than the rest of Northern Europe. Now, the problem with the Danish People's Party is they never asserted themselves and tried to actually get into the coalition. They never demanded actual seats. They never said, we want to be minister of this and this. They just played it super safe. And that hurt them big time. And so it came to a point where all of a sudden support for them suddenly dwindled, because other parties began co-opting their anti-immigration, secure borders message. Plus you had two new parties directly competing with them. You had Danish New Right, which essentially said we're just as anti-immigration, if not more, but we advocate more of a traditional right of center economic policy. We're not populist. So they were like more like the AFD compared to, say, the French National Rally. And then you had Rasmus Paludan, and I'm pronouncing his name wrong too, who started Stram Kurs, which basically went full bore and said, we're like the Danish People's Party, only way more radical. Vote for us. And so they had direct competitors, and they had other parties also co-opting the message. Well, Mette, she said, I'm returning the Social Democrats to our roots. So, like I've said, in some countries like Bulgaria and Slovakia and some other places, you have people who are social democrats who economically are hardline socialists, but on social issues, they would be considered super right-wing in Scandinavia in terms of immigration, homosexuality, abortion, stuff like that. The traditional gender roles, the family, the whole works. Well, once upon a time, the Social Democrats in Northern Europe actually did oppose immigration. They said that immigration was a capitalist plot against the working man to undermine his wages and quality of life. Bernie Sanders in America used to say the exact same thing. So in the last election, Mette campaigned that she had seen the light and that now the Social Democrats were going to be strong on immigration. And this was a major winning issue. It propelled her to the position of prime minister. Once elected as prime minister, one of the first things that Mette and her new government did was persecute Inga Stoiber for doing her job, because she actually tried to implement girl power as Minister of Immigration and Integration. So, I've said many times before, these so-called refugees coming into Europe are largely young males from middle-class families. And as you probably already know, some of them will leave their country, and on the way out, they will buy a young teenage bride to bring with them to Europe. And this is all kinds of violations of Danish marriage law. They actually have very, very strict marriage laws. And so Inga Stoiber said, well, 1,000 years ago, this would have been perfectly normal in Denmark, but we don't allow it anymore. So when these middle-class Muslims would come in, posing as refugees with the 15-year-old girl that they purchased on their way out, she would separate the 15-year-old girl and interview them and conduct an investigation into whether they had been forced into the marriage. So the new left-wing government of Denmark said, oh, she had separated refugee families, which is a complete absurdity, a complete mischaracterization of what even happened. They sentenced her to 60 days in jail. Of course, Danish jail is like a crappy American motel. But then what they did is they banned her from serving in parliament, and she was kicked out of her seat. And her own party, Venstre, cooked hugely. And so Venstre should never, ever be trusted ever again. Now, it used to be that the Social Democrats and Venstre were the two main parties. Right now, in the polls, the Social Democrats are the only big party in Denmark. Venstre has caved in because their former leader, Lars Rasmussen, apparently has started a splinter group called the Moderate Party. I don't know much about this. If you're in Denmark, post a comment and you can help bring me up to speed, because I don't know why exactly he created this party, but obviously Venstre is a shit party for throwing out their own member because she tried to enforce Danish marriage law. So a scandal over the extermination of the entire farm-raised mink population has boiled over into the collapse of the Danish government and an early snap election. Now, you're probably wondering, what are the animal rights activists saying about this? Well, as far as I can tell, they all supported the eradication of these minks. The leader of a major Danish animal rights group is still defending it, saying that it was justified because now we don't have mink farming, and mink farming was cruelty to animals. So completely exterminating all these animals was worth it as a backdoor way of banning mink farming, which a lot of people didn't like anyway. Now, I didn't even know that mink pelts were a big thing anymore. I think of mink as something that wealthy older women liked when I was a kid. I didn't even know that mink coats were still around, honestly, but I guess they were, and I guess that a lot of them were from these minks raised in Denmark. Personally, I believe it's sinful to waste food, and I find the extermination of 17 million mammals to be pretty grotesque, even if they're just weird, elongated rats. 17 million of them, I mean, it seems like that could have made about 100 million cans of Fancy Feast that could have fed all of Denmark's cats for a month and a half. One of the parties in the previous ruling coalition with the Social Democrats was Radical Venstre. This is a left-wing version of the Venstre party, which I just mentioned. Venstre is certainly no one to be trusted anymore ever again. Now, the Radical Venstre party is the one that apparently pulled out of the ruling coalition, and Mette knew was going to vote against her in a vote of no confidence. She now says that they have been trying to blackmail her. Who knows? At any rate, post a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. Click the like button. Subscribe to my backup channels on BitChute and Odyssey, because there's no telling when YouTube could suddenly delete this channel, as they have done with thousands of other conservative YouTube channels. You can also support me on Patreon and Subscribestar. So thank you to the people who are supporting me on those platforms. And click the subscribe button. New video every few days.